Hey, what's happening?
What's going on?
You've been gone so long.
Yeah. Nothing like a good inside joke to get things started.
That's right. Hey, so did you guys, like, as a family, when you were little, did you watch TV shows together?
Like when I was a kid? Yeah.
Do you have
Kind of
like
me
a
and my
favorite?
brothers.
Do you have like a favorite midweek,
I mean, like
like
we were
Family Matters or something like
we
that?
were like The Simpsons.
Oh, I couldn't watch
I
that.
know. I was gonna say like that's like good quality like family TV now.
That's
But
what's
back
wrong
then,
with you.
exactly explains a lot.
Do you remember though, like you got these long seasons, and you're watching like the live shows pop up,
Yep.
and then like you're geared up, you're waiting on that next show, and all of a sudden it's like it's not the next one in line,
Yep. It's like
it's a rerun,
yeah.
and you're like, oh crap, this is terrible.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing today.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Do you like that intro?
It's good, man. It's exactly what we're doing. Tell the people what we're doing, Brian.
Yeah, so we need a little bit more time to grab a couple of interviews to continue on in our series from examining 248's research around 15 observations in urban disciple making movements. And so while we wait to get those interviews, we thought, hey, let's just drop in a couple of episodes instead of, not running anything at all.
Yeah.
So this is that moment where we were going to just go back and record some of our old episodes that are just audio, get some video.
Which we are still going to do.
Yeah, we'll do that actually next. But this one, we don't have like a full episode on the Matthew 28 exercise.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
So this is an important tool that we use in our Missionary Pathway Huddles. We use it when we train leaders that come to Kansas City to learn about what we're doing. We use it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly, this is a great exercise with churched people who are kind of making those paradigms, like those shifts in paradigm of like what disciple making looks like, how to plant the gospel, get outside of ourselves, not just do kind of church as we knew, always known it. And this is an exercise that I got from Roy Moran and I'm, other movement practitioners globally. So I don't even know exactly like, hey, where this originated from, but I did this with Roy years and years ago. Always a significant tool for us in the right setting, especially like, as people are beginning to make those paradigm shifts. And so it was super simple. And we call it the Matthew 28 exercise, or the Great Commission exercise.
We joke about how we don't do long episodes sometimes when we get this, and then they're 30 to 40 minutes anyway. This is probably going to be short.
Hopefully, if we're doing this right.
Yeah, but the design is like, it's a very simple tool to help people just go, oh, wait a second. I got to think about that for a minute. Like that's important. Yeah, so this is a super helpful tool. I love doing this in the Missionary Pathway. So welcome also the third member of our podcast today, the Post-it Pad.
Welcome, Post-it Pad.
Yeah, so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, so I'm going to be obviously jumping from screen to screen here, but the Post-it Pad, I mean, in many ways, it's like a whiteboard, and whiteboard is...
It's our love.
We love it, man. Yeah. We just love a good whiteboard. We love dreaming. Should we jump in?
So Cory's going to be like the facilitator, and I'm going to function as the audience. But here's the deal. I get to function not only with my own thoughts, but the last Missionary Pathway Huddle I ran, I have all of their thoughts as well. So there's actually... Oh,
it's all right. Hey, as you're choking, let me just... you got super emotional just now because it's such a... it's a big deal.
I have multiple people's thoughts here. You can't really see that though because the light. Oh, there it is. There's all their thoughts. So there's multiple people responding, even though I will be their voice.
Yeah,
I'll be their voice.
That's right. Well, welcome all the people that you represent. All right. So really, as we set the stage for this, you can do this online. You can do this in person. You can make this long. You can do it real short. But what I like to do often is like there's a group of people. I'll even break them off into little groups. And what we'll do is we'll read together Matthew 28. Generally speaking, I start at verse 18. You can start at verse 16 as well because it's really good stuff. 16. You want to do 16? Yeah, it depends depending on the time. I used to always start at 16. But then what we do is we read that and we say, okay, I want everyone to like have their ears open for the 4 things that Jesus explicitly tells us to do that has some, what I would say, like command flavor. Right. So things, and I know some of the original language and the words and whatever, but like in the translation that we have, what are the 4 things that Jesus tells us to do? So we put that on one side. So you can look at the Post-it pad right here. Thank you, Post-it pad. That on one side.
What Jesus said.
Yeah, what Jesus said. On the other side, I always tell people, it's like, hey, we're not here to be cynical, but we're here to just kind of be honestly critical. Like we can look in the mirror and say, what do we do instead? So what does Jesus explicitly tell us in his final instructions before, he leaves this amazing job to be done to the 11 remaining disciples? It's like before he raises up in front of their eyes, like before all that stuff, what does he tell us to do and why is it so important? Then we look at our own church history, what we've done in the church, maybe church leaders, and we say, what do we do instead? Not cynical, just honestly critical. It tends to be a fun exercise. So we're going to read this together. And so I'm going to have a volunteer in the crowd read this, Matthew 28:16. Oh, Brian, yes.
Thank you. I got it.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with 16. So it says, then the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some of them doubted. Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age.
Beautiful. All right, so what I generally do, and Brian, I know that you and I have led lots of these, and you might have your own flavor on this, so if there's anything that you like to do, jump on in.
I always open up just with simple DBS practices. Go, hey, what stands out?
Yeah, beautiful. And so I imagine, as you say, what stands out, what were some things that have come up recently, or just generally as you've done that?
The biggest thing, especially if you start with verse 16, for me, is always highlighting verse 17, where these 11 men are literally standing with the risen Son of God, and some of them doubted. Yeah. And then I usually emphasize, like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're feeling inside right now, these dudes were standing with Jesus, and some of them were like, I don't know. Yeah. He might.
Yeah, the first time I did this as a participant, I remember thinking the same thing. It's like the most important task ever given to a group of people ever was given to some who doubted.
Yeah.
And it's pretty phenomenal. It actually lowers the bar in some ways for us in the sense that we don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like, so these men are walking in their doubt. So yeah, that is definitely a huge benefit of starting in verse 16. And by the way, if you're listening to this and it's just audio, when we say we have Post-it pad here, there's a third screen I'm going to be writing.
You should find it on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube, or I think on Spotify, you can also watch them.
Yeah.
So just know that, in case you're wondering what we're talking about, there's Post-it pad as the third screen. Okay, so often I'll do this together as a group. I'm going to jump over to Post-it pad microphone. Hey, how's it going?
You're so close to the screen. It's just like from here down.
And my voice drops an octave. All right. So usually I'll say, okay, what's the first thing? We'll do the first one together. What's the first thing that Jesus tells his disciples to do?
I've been given all authority. Go. I'll always ask people on this one if they're hesitating at all. I go, it's like, look for the verbs.
Yeah. So remember, we're looking for the 4 things that kind of have command flavor, things that Jesus tells us to do. The first one is go. I'll often do this as a group together before I break them off into small groups. We'll say, well, what Jesus said was go. What do we often do instead? Brian, what are some answers that people throw out usually when we say, instead of go, what do we do instead? In our church history, in our critical thinking in the church, what do we do instead?
Stay.
We stay.
We invite.
If you can't read this, just know I'm writing those words down.
These are some, I'm answering with what some of our groups said.
Yep.
We avoid.
Ooh, avoid. Yeah. Sometimes people just say, don't go.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like avoid. Yeah.
Shy away. Yeah. Get comfortable.
Ooh, yeah.
Attract.
It's a good one. I have limited space. I'm just going to write small words. Yeah.
A couple of the last ones were get a pro.
Get a pro.
Yeah. So like it's not a command to us. Essentially, it's like someone else should be doing this.
Yeah, which is a lot of times people say send.
Yeah. Send.
Right. That's
yeah.
one that comes up a lot. We don't go, but we'll send others to go.
Yeah. Last one here. Well, two more. One would be run away.
Ooh, interesting.
I love doing this because I always get new ones.
Yeah.
Every
I
time
haven't
that
got run
people
away
say things. And then the last one was condemn.
Okay. So it's a big one, right? So that's the first one. And that one, in some ways, it's easier. I don't know if easy is the right word, but there's like straight up in your face things that, oh man, we don't do this always as a church. Ones that come up a ton, we stay, we invite, we attract, we send. Those are four that pop up almost always, almost every single time that I do it. So then I'll say, okay, now I want you to break off in your groups. I want you to find the other three things that Jesus says to do. So we're going to pretend like we just did that together. And I want to say, okay, what's number two, guys? Since besides go, what's the next one that the command that Jesus tells us to do?
Make disciples of all the nations.
Make disciples of all nations.
Man, if anybody has any issues with like audio stuff, like that deal where like you hear stuff and you're like,
that messed you up a little bit.
That noise on the post-it pad. Yeah.
All right. So usually I'll say, okay, what do we do? What do we often make instead of disciples, or what do we do besides make disciples? Brian, what are some answers that often come up?
Programs.
Ooh, instead of making disciples, we make programs.
This is the next one is one I would say always comes up. Converts.
We make converts instead of disciples. That one comes up almost all the time.
Consumers.
We make consumers.
A lot of these are kind of the same, but it's like spectators, fans. This one was the new one. Sermon analyzers.
Interesting. Yeah, I've gotten similar answers before.
It says this next one is, again, a lot of these are sort of in the same vein. Bolster attendance.
Yep. You get attendees. That one I get all the time. Attendees. Yep.
And train ministry leaders.
Oh, yeah. All right, I'm running out of space.
Yeah. So I think we hit it, though.
All right. Hey, great insight over there. Post it as I jump onto my screen here.
That's weird.
Okay. Is that weird? You don't like that? Whoa, hello. So those are two that like already are setting the stage a lot for. You can see why this is a very important exercise that we do as people begin to make those paradigm shifts. That we're looking at the most important things that Jesus tells us to do. The last instructions that he tells his disciples to do. He says, "Go." Right? Actually, out there in your life. Don't just stay here. And what do we usually do as believers? Man, we usually stay. Maybe we'll invite people to this thing, these programs. We'll attract them. We'll send others. But that's just generally speaking the posture of a Christian in our cultural experience is not to go. Make disciples of all nations. What do we usually do instead of make disciples? We make programs, we make converts, we make consumers, we make spectators, attendees. We often, like people will say, we'll make people who we'll make those who have a lot of knowledge, you know? Yeah. So those are answers that pop up a lot. So already they're sitting here going, oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is
how do I feel about
this? I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. Yeah. Maybe we need to do something else. Okay. So then the third one, this one always is interesting depending on like how your church background. So I sometimes kind of try to hit a couple main points on this one and then go to the third one. Not to that it's not important, but you can get caught up on theological conversations that may or may not be helpful. Usually may not. But what's the third one that pops up, Brian, as I jump back over to Post-it Pad?
Baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. The verb is just baptize.
Okay.
Jesus told us to baptize.
So Jesus told us to baptize. So what do we often do instead? And so these are some answers that pop up, and we'll probably give you a couple of the ones that tend to be really important a lot.
This one pops up often. We wait.
We wait.
So it's not immediate.
Yeah. And I usually throw out that stat. When you look at all the pictures of baptism in the New Testament, almost all of them are immediate,
right?
Except for Paul.
Yeah.
And that was like a 3-day wait because he had scales on his eyes, right? So that was like, all right, cool. So we tend to wait, and an answer that comes up a lot for me
attend a membership meeting.
A membership class or some kind of like what you believe class. That is a huge one that comes up all the time.
Usually I ask this question too, just because this one feels a little bit more difficult, because most people, when they hear baptized, are like, well, we do that.
Yeah.
We don't do something else instead. So I'll
Right.
say, what's different about the way that we go about this one? Not what do we do instead, but what's different?
Yep. That's good.
Which usually cultivates some answers like, it's not immediate. It's done by professionals.
Professionals. Yeah. That one is a huge one to take away. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a couple of others, but those are like the three kind of important ones, that it's not immediate. There's a class attached to it oftentimes, and it's done by somebody that didn't lead that person to Jesus.
Yep. Yeah. That one's really big. Not yeah, what you said. What not what we do instead.
Yeah.
But like how did you word it?
What's different about the way we do it?
What's different about the way? Yeah, that's really good. I'll start using that. The professional one is what is so, I think, significant in the paradigm that we think through a lot. And really all of those are. But the reason why I sit on that one a lot is because that alone, that idea tends to remove, like when I've done this exercise lots of times, that simple statement seems to remove something from people's eyes. It's like, whoa, I have permission. It's a funny way of saying it, but Jesus not only it's more of a commandment, but in us, it's like, I have permission to plant the gospel and baptize people right there. And we don't have to have the bottleneck of professional people baptizing like that. Like, that paradigm shift, that like that light bulb that goes on people's heads, super, super important. All right, last one, Brian.
The last one, this is usually what happens, so I'm just going to say it the way it usually happens. Teach.
Yep.
Like, because I do the look for the verbs intentionally.
Yep.
And just say that. I go, give me the 4 verbs. And I hear go, make, baptize, teach.
All right. So, and when I do it, usually, so do you let them sit in that?
I do that on purpose so that you don't get the,
you can make a point. Yeah. So that's when I'll be like, oh yeah, we say teach. But what does it actually say?
Teach to obey.
Teach to obey. Right. So important.
Because if we just did teach, it would be another one of those, well, we don't do anything different.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, exactly. So what do we, instead of teach to obey, what do we often do instead?
This was a new one that I thought was pretty good. We suggest.
That's funny. Yeah, we suggest. I haven't heard that one. You do get a lot of different answers on this, which is fun.
Yeah. We preach motivational messages.
Oh. I'm just going to write motivate. I hear a lot. We teach to learn.
Yeah, teach to learn.
So
this one was a new one to me as well. Someone said we equate understanding with faith.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Which is the learning piece there.
So if we know a lot, it means we have a lot of faith or we're mature.
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying, actually, the last thing I want you to teach them to follow me.
Yeah.
You're actually putting yourself. So if you're a disciple, to make disciples, all right, you're baptizing them. And you're teaching them to follow Jesus in his words. You're not teaching them to follow us. So that's one that comes out as like, sometimes it's like, we teach to obey what the church says or obey what the leader says or the pastor says, right? That's something that's come up a bunch. Any other answers that?
Just one on low accountability. So we're giving information without activity. Those are like 2 different ones, but essentially it's making the point that what we do instead is we're giving information with no follow-up.
Yeah. That's actually
there's no I mean, I always say this, like I assume the best about many of these leaders.
Totally.
There's a expectation that people will follow through and obey, but when there's no accountability, what you're teaching essentially is that part's not important.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope you do something with it. I hope your life is different, but if there's no accountability, you're actually subconsciously training people that doesn't matter.
Yeah. Totally.
I don't have to do anything because nobody's going to ask.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's also fair to say, like, we're not saying that this exercise is the end all be all of all. Like,
it's just the beginning point to open people's minds up.
Right on. And it's like, you can see things on the right-hand side that are not at all bad.
Right.
There is definitely an idea of inviting people. to community.
Jesus invited
right?
people.
Totally. Those are not bad things. It's very important to send people, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't see a lot of things on the right hand side. Are programs bad? No, programs are not bad. Yeah.
What we're saying in
I'm
this,
looking at some of the others. A lot of these are.
yeah,
Don't do this.
some of them are, but
Yeah.
you asked, let me hit two things real quick. You asked maybe what I've like learned to add to this
Yeah.
as I've facilitated this exercise. After we get through with these 4 pieces, I usually ask like, hey, let's just hit pause and do an emotional check-in. What are you feeling right now?
That's such a great Brian question.
And most of the time I get sad,
yeah,
angry, and ashamed.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not trying to create an environment where you're like toxic shaming yourself or like, you know, and the anger is like, it's not like I'm mad at someone. It's like, no, I want to lean back into the simplicity, the reproducibility, like the invitation that Jesus gave us to say, which I think is what you're saying with all those things. They're not all bad. It's just we've leaned so hard into those things that it's overcomplicated.
Yeah. And then our own forms, right? Our own, the cultural way of that is to be a follower of Jesus in America. I mean, I'm sure it's other cultures too, but I'm a missionary in America, right? Like this is what it means to be Christian. And this is what it means to be a part of the mission of Jesus. And so no wonder people are confused. So when we use weird language, like, hey, everyone's a missionary, like there's a lot of baggage that comes with that word. But what the good part of that is, if I identify as a missionary, is that I'm identifying with the left side column, right? Like I actually am, because the very picture of the left-hand side is multiplicative, which meaning we are in the stream of the left-hand side, right? We are those who are also making disciples because we've been made a disciple through the streams of people. Like we are a part of that very commission. And yeah, it's like if I understand myself to be on the left-hand side of that column, then I'm able to like mentally, like those paradigms that need to be shifted begin to happen. Like we could have people read books. We could do a 3-month or 3-year course to try to do paradigm shifting. Some of that's actually really good. Some people might absolutely need that. This is like a good, fast, efficient way to be like, Jesus says for us to do some things. We don't do this. Super important. Now let's take this journey. What are the paradigms that God is calling us to begin to walk into? And if he right now is saying, you have not only permission, but there's kind of an expectation. If you're following me that you get to do this, then what's your tribe? Mm-hmm. Like, what's your patch? What's your missional context? All these words that we say for you to be someone who can go and make disciples, plant the gospel, baptize new believers right there, teach people how to obey Jesus. Like where and who and how is all on that left-hand side. So that's why it's a fun exercise to do with people.
Yeah. And last thing on that would just be, again, it's not the end all be all exercise, and we don't want to lean so hard in it that it breaks down. Because like we said, we're recognizing that's not all bad stuff. Some of it is essential and needed. It's just to cultivate a conversation to say, where have we leaned away from what Jesus said, and how can we lean back into what Jesus said?
And my last thing is we close here of when and to whom to do this with is like probably not new believers. Or probably not people who are very churched. Yeah. Like I will not do this as I kick off with new believers because they don't need to.
Nope.
Like we can just look at the Great Commission and say, what does Jesus tell us to do?
I was going to say, just look at the left side. What Jesus has to do. You want to do that?
Which is a DBS in and of itself. Right. So just know that as you're training people, this is more going to be for a churched crowd, kind of mobilizing that first generation of disciple makers.
Amen.
There you go.
Enjoy.
Go do it.